Welcome to Behind the Line, the podcast where you'll get untold stories from first responders and military veterans. I'm Tim Hagman. I'll be your host. My guest today was born in Pennsylvania and moved to Oklahoma when he was 8. He's the son of Tim and Cheryl and has 3 older brothers. As a kid, he collected sports cards, sports memorabilia, and fished a lot, something he still enjoys and is passionate about today. In 2005, at the age of 18, he joined the United States Army and deployed 2 times to Afghanistan. In 2011, after 6 years of service, he was honorably discharged. He and his wife, Christina, have been married 18 years, and together they have 2 children, Jade and Rowan. They moved to Ireland at the end of 2019, and that's where they call home today. In the spring of 2025, he wrote a book called Smoke 'Em If You Got 'Em. He says his book is not a hero story. It's about the war that followed him home, the silence, substance abuse, the legal trouble, and the long fight back.
I'm standing hip deep in Irish cold water. Fly rod balanced in my right hand, waiting for a brown trout to make a mistake. 6,000 clicks and 19 years from Afghanistan, but sometimes the distance collapses in an instant. It starts with the sound, the fighter jet, miles up, tearing across the Irish sky. Probably just training runs, but my body reacts before my mind can catch up. Heart pounding, scanning the tree line, check sectors, where's cover? I freeze mid-cast, water rolling against my waders, while my brain sorts reality from memory. This is the River Dio, not the Pesh. That's a NATO jet, not a fast one coming in for danger close. That's just my reflection on the water, not a potential threat. The fish rises 20 yards upstream, real, present, here. I breathe out slowly, the same way I did with the rifle in my hands. My fingers find the cigarette pack in my vest pocket. Automatic. I haven't smoked in months, but I keep them close, just in case I need to remember how to breathe. This relationship with smoke, the comfort and destruction, the peace and the poison, it's been my constant companion since the war. Sometimes I think I've kept them around just to remind myself I'm still choosing to live, even when I'm choosing something that kills. The ritual is still sacred, even when the habit's broken. It remains the same. Pack, unwrap, light, inhale, exist. The smoke curls up in familiar dance, disappearing in Irish mist instead of Afghan dust. Some ghosts follow you anywhere, but these days I can see them coming. My phone buzzes, a text from Christina. Catch anything? Not yet, I type back. Home in an hour. Home. Took 19 years to truly find that word again, to unpack what followed me from war, to understand how one deployment to a place I couldn't even find on a map would become the invisible battle I'd fight long after leaving. This is that story. The war that didn't end when I came home. The boy who went to fight. The broken man who returned. And the long road back to the river where I now stand, finally learning to breathe without smoke. 8:30 in the morning. I'm 14, doing what any half-grown boy does best, ignoring my mom. Boys, it's time to get up. We're going to be late. I roll over. I don't care. It's Tuesday. School can fuck off. I just want to sleep. But peace wasn't coming that morning. None of us knew what was about to hit. 8:40, she's yelling again. 8:50, now I'm pushing it. Trouble's coming. I can feel it. But this time it's different. Boys, come downstairs right now. Something's happened. Her voice is shaking. That stopped me cold. I couldn't name the fear in it, but I heard it clear as day. I sit up. So does my brother. We don't speak, we just move down the stairs through the silence. She's glued to the TV. That alone was weird. We didn't watch much. Not before school. Not like this. I look at the screen. 2 tall buildings. One of them smoking. The other's untouched. I don't understand what I'm seeing. Mom tries to explain, but her face says it louder than her mouth. We read the words instead. A plane full of people flew into the building. What the fuck? We sit there frozen. Then we watch live as the second plane slams into the second tower, right there on the screen. And it hits. This isn't an accident. It's an attack. The whole world shifted in that second. So did mine. I didn't care about grades or girlfriends or any of that bullshit. I was an American kid, and that morning I felt it. Revenge, glory, fire in my chest. I wanted in. I didn't know where Afghanistan was, didn't understand what war really was, didn't care. The country was pissed, and so was I. Every radio, every TV, the message was loud and simple. Put a boot in their ass. I didn't just agree. I wanted it to be my boot. I knew one thing in that moment. If given the chance, I'd go. I'd fight. And now, nearly 25 years later, I see it. That moment didn't just change the world, it changed me.
That's the prologue from Smoke 'em If You Got 'em, and read by the book's author and our guest today, Jon Flatt. Welcome, Jon, to the Behind the Line podcast.
Tim, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you. And thanks for staying up. I know it's you're 8 hours ahead. I'm in Southern California, and you're in Ireland. And I will say that, technology, love it or hate it, today it's given this opportunity for you and me to record this and have a couple conversations prior. So I really do appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today.
Absolutely, and luckily it's still light here. We stay light until about 11 o'clock at night this time of year, so we've got a few hours left.
Well, I appreciate you spending those hours with us. So
Yeah,
we're good. You know, I just want to say that, I read your book and I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to learn about, the many people who have served in the military, those that are exposed, what they're exposed to, um, the horrors, the experiences firsthand, and how it affects them, how it affects their lives, even after, many years. Um, your book, it's powerful, it's emotional, and you should be very proud of the work you did there. So congratulations on getting that done.
thank you. That means a lot to hear. The feedback has been really good, really positive, and truthfully, I didn't expect that when I put it out there. I was a bit nervous about it, so it's really good to hear again.
So, I mean, you mentioned this in your prologue, but why did you join the army, and what made you, you know, want to serve your country? If you can go in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, obviously being such a young age, 14 at 9/11 was a big deal. But my grandfather was actually a Vietnam vet, and he ended up dying from Agent Orange. And we spent a lot of time fishing. We were quite close, and spent a lot of time in the boat. I have his old fishing vest behind the computer here, so still very close in that connection. But he would have been relatively guarded about it, but enough for me to be motivated and interested. And then 9/11 occurs, and it felt like I was just buying my time until the opportunity to turn 18 and join. And then when I got to 18, maybe I slowed down a bit. I wasn't so sure about it. Then the girl who I ended up marrying was actively in another relationship, so I was a bit like, "Fuck this! I got to get out of here and move on and do something else with my life while I wait for her to figure out if she wants to be with him or not." So that was kind of the push. But yeah, it was a building thing. It would have been a kind of childhood into turning 18 and seeing, okay, it's time to do this. So
You kept that tradition going after your grandfather.
I did, yeah, yeah. And he passed about 3 years after I got home, 4 years after I got home, from Agent Orange complications. So there's a lot of continued connection in the sense that when I'm on the water, he's there, and I can feel that, and that keeps me kind of connected in that way. But um, it was important to me to continue on what he did. Um, and he was always a lot like me in the sense he never really saw himself as a hero. We never really saw what he experienced as worth telling stories about, and perhaps that's where it came from. But it was always critical that I could carry that on and be the one that did that in the family. So
Yeah, well, good deal. Um, so when did you go to boot camp? Where did you go to boot camp, and how soon after boot camp was your first deployment to Afghanistan?
all right, so I'm infantry, so 11 Bravo. So I went to Fort Benning, Georgia. August of 2005 is when I arrived. I graduated December 2nd of that same year, and that would have been basic plus or eight, what is it? OSA, one station unit training. So I did it all in one location. So when I graduated in December, I was an infantryman. It was done. I got home in December and then mobilized with my National Guard unit March 1st of the next year. So we had about 120 days um, from when I got home. to when we mobilized. But we went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi first, so it wasn't straight to country. But that time period was quite short, and I went from 18 to 19 during that time period. So a lot of catching up for lost time, trying to feel like I was living an adult life before I left.
Oh yeah, I get it. I get it. Wow. So Georgia in August, a little hot, a little humid,
It was it was warm, and I felt it. I definitely felt that. I mean, coming from Oklahoma, it was already warm, but the humidity really laid down. And then
and then
by
Mississippi doesn't get much better the weather wise.
no, 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 and we started, well, we ended basic towards the winter, so it was getting cold, but I got the heat at the beginning, and then when I got to Mississippi, it was March, so it was still a bit like, springtime. We weren't too hot, but man, by the time we left in June, we were quite warm. But nothing prepared us for Kuwait, though. I'll tell you what, Kuwait was another level of hot. We were only there for about a week, but it was too much.
A week too long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you deploy to Afghanistan, and where did you deploy to? And while you were there,
So
what were you tasked with, and what were some of your responsibilities?
yeah. So we deployed to Kabul. We were going on a security force mission. Being National Guard, that tended to be the type of jobs I think a lot of us got, at least during that time period. Got there in country mid-June 2006. Um, my platoon was stationed at Camp Cobra in Durilaman, which is essentially a suburb of Kabul. So we were in the greater Kabul area. Um, and Camp Cobra is right next to Old Queen's Palace and surrounded by a lot of old Russian Afghan war
Hmm.
relics and bombings and things. It was very clear that war had been there before, well before us. And we spent 6 months at Camp Cobra and 6 months at Camp Black Horse as a platoon. But then about a couple weeks after getting there, we caught a secondary mission. So our secondary mission was to work with Afghan National Army soldiers as a training unit, and I put air quotes because I didn't feel equipped to train any soldiers at that stage in my life. But we were attached to them to go on forward missions, and we were split up into smaller groups, usually two per group from our platoon, going with a squad, or maybe two squads of Afghan soldiers. So the ANA is what we call them, and we would go on month-long segments. So different locations for each of us at different times. But a lot of our AO would have been in the I'm trying to remember the exact provinces, but in the Pesh Valley, the Korengal Valley, and then Nuristan kind of province and Kunar province. So kind of that northeastern sector, where the mountains kind of hit, and it gets rough. So a lot of people have heard of the Korengal Valley, and that's one that is quite famous. But that whole area would have been relatively active during and after our time there, and before our time as well.
Yeah, I've done some reading on that area, and
Yeah.
you're right. It was very active.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So, your book. How did you
Yeah.
come up with the title for your book?
I mean, I think anybody that's served is probably instantly identifies it. But um, I can remember. Well, I started smoking at 17. I wasn't supposed to, and I went to basic, and it was like we just before we got there, we all smoked as much as we could, and then you couldn't have them. So then when we got back and joined our units, it became a really common thing for your commander at some point after training or whatever, maybe your NCO, someone would just holler off, smoke them if you got them. And at first it was nothing, it didn't really stick with me. It didn't matter. But as we got further and especially into the deployment, it became kind of a safety blanket. It became something that just meant a lot to me. So when I was sitting down trying to kick things around, um, I've said for years to people that cigarettes were always my best friend. They never talked back. They were there whenever I needed them. They didn't give me any shit. They just did their job, and that was it. So it was something that connected with me in a deep way while we were there. There are a few moments and kind of specific times where I heard someone say it, in kind of post, I wouldn't say firefights. I didn't really experience any major firefights myself, but post kind of stressful, tense moments in country where someone would crack up, smoke 'em if you got them, and it stuck. But even once I got home and all the drilling and different activation moments or training time periods, it was something that was always said. And eventually I became more senior. And so I started saying it as often as possible. And I've always thought it, I say it to my wife, like about myself. She doesn't smoke, but if I'm needing a cigarette at that time, I'll just pop off, smoke one if you got them. So I guess it just stuck. And when I was trying to come up with a name for what I'd written, it just seemed like the right thing. I knew I'd mentioned it a few times in the book, and I wanted it to connect to anybody who had ever kind of served. I wanted them to know like this is someone that's been there, that knows the importance of this phrase. I remember a drill sergeant at basic telling me um, once he said he never smoked, never a smoker. He said, but once you've been shot at, you'll smoke anything. So it stuck with me, and um, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It was for me at least.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate the explanation, and I think even before you explain that, people who have served probably understood right away when they saw the title
Yeah,
of your book what you were referring to. So,
yeah.
um, so if you don't mind, because you go in a lot of detail in your book, so um, would you mind sharing some of the difficulties you had after you returned from Afghanistan, um, while you were in the army, and even after being discharged from the army? Some of the what was difficult for you?
Yeah, coming home, there was this whole sense that I didn't have any problems. I didn't have any experiences that would warrant me to have PTSD, if you will, or like the book discusses, my experiences were minimal. The times I experienced getting shot at were actually friendly fire. Main one was friendly fire. So there was very little kind of validation in my mind for any sort of problems. And I came home holding tight to that. I had friends that had been shot at, had been shot. I had friends that got Purple Hearts, and guys that we knew that didn't come home, and so there was a lot of minimization in my own mind of what I experienced. And I think in doing that, I buried a lot of stuff really quickly, and I immediately started smoking a lot of weed, which um, I think a lot of us did, to be honest. I think it kind of helped us decompress. But for me, that just kind of compiled and eventually spiraled over the next few years. About 4 years after the deployment, I was just getting out, but I had at that stage been kind of addicted to various substances, and I liked to party, and I kind of wrote it off as that. I just was hanging out and doing my thing, but things became pretty clear when I started running out of certain things and not being able to cope. And then uh, my wife and I and daughter, unfortunately, moved away. Well, fortunately, she moved with us, but unfortunately, she was there for this. It's one of the things that was hard to put in and release in the book. The fact that I had a child, and as a father, I was trying to get clean and um, get off of. At that time, it was mostly speed or Adderall or any uppers that I could get a hold of, and just trying to reset. So there was the substance abuse at that time, and then I actually ended up getting multiple arrests for various reasons, but trying to cope with the way the world saw me at that stage in my life was quite hard. And I just gotten clean, so I knew I had to stay off of hard substances. I knew it was important, and then I was being drug tested regularly, dealing with DHS and the courts trying to get back into my family's life. My wife stood by me. She knew that who I was, and she didn't see what they saw. But like I say in the book, like I didn't stay by my side. I saw what I started to question myself. I started to see things in a different way. So Um, Legal troubles there, and I started drinking a lot at that stage because they couldn't really test. Well, they can test for it, but they weren't interested in that. That's not what they were looking at. So I coped in a different way. So then just trying to, I guess, find myself, and that would be the biggest thing. Like I didn't know who I was, and I didn't admit to having any issues. So then there's also during that time, I started having a lot of night terrors and survivor's guilt and processing kind of what I didn't experience and what I did experience mixed together. The night terrors, and I've actually done some research now. They started about 2 years removed, and I guess that's actually a fairly common time frame. They don't usually hit right away, and depending on your experience, obviously everybody's is going to be different. But there's a gap for a lot of people, and when that happened, I was about when I started using harder drugs, and I I ignored it. I didn't ignore it. It was, you couldn't ignore certain things. You can only wake up running around the house looking for a rifle so many times before you have to admit what's going on. But at the same time, I kind of told myself it was me being over the top, and being like a bit sensitive, and um, I didn't really give myself any sort of credit with that in those moments. And then um, there was a deployment after my deployment, that I was actually slotted to go on, but my contract expired around this. So it's around the time I'm getting clean and facing legal troubles. And one of the guys who took my well, he was a replacement into my what I would have probably ended up having the sergeant promotion. He didn't make it home, and I found out about that, and just there was so a lot of these things compile all in that first 2 to 4 years, 6 years after coming home. And I think at that stage I learned to compartmentalize a bit. I just closed the door on that. I was actually yesterday going through some old things that I wrote. I've had a tendency to write poetry when I'm really pissed off or high, at different stages. And there was a poem that I wrote, that talks about the survivor's guilt, and I end it with saying basically I'm closing that door to my brain, and I'll come back when I'm more sane. And I think that that's where all this book came from, is finally coming back to it, because I knew at that stage I wasn't in the right space to handle it. But you can only ignore certain dreams and stuff so much. So I think that was me trying to let it out enough to move forward and get back to life and raise my child at the time. Um, so
Well, thank you for that. You go into detail in the book about that, about
mhm.
you not being passing up the promotion to stay in. You would have to stay in, I believe. And
Yeah.
your friend that you just spoke about, who unfortunately didn't make it back. So you go in a lot of detail in the book, and reading that, I could feel it. How you were. I mean, obviously, not even no comparison, but I could imagine how you were feeling when that all went down and the news came back to you. So it's
It
in the
was
book.
it was a really hard moment, man. It was a very hard point, because everything had just happened. And honestly, when I read that chapter still, that was that was something I found really quickly when I go back and read these. My son, he can read, but he'd rather me read this to him. He wants to hear it from me, and I can only get a few chapters every time. And that realization that this is hitting at such a high level in my emotions, I guess it makes it even more real for me. It makes kind of confirms like what I'm actually feeling is real.
Mm.
But that section of my book and that section of my life is something that was very, very dark for me. So
Well, thanks for opening up about that.
yeah.
So you left the army in 2011.
Yep.
And so what was it that caused you to decide to write a book 14 years after being honorably discharged?
Yeah, so it's weird. We had this cat, and we adopted him. He was a stray. We only had him for about a year. Um, but he kind of connected with all of us. But one day, he got hit by a car, and um, I suppose just this idea of like very like structured. I wanted. I wanted to let everybody process it, but I wanted to control the processing of the death. And actually, after all of this, before I wrote, I watched Restrepo, the documentary on the Korengal Valley, and it was the year after we were there. And there was a scene in it, and I think it's Restrepo. Actually, it may be Citizen Soldier, but in one of those documentaries, the one of the NCOs, they had just lost someone, and he had this conversation with his soldiers, saying like, "Cry, mourn now. You've got 30 seconds, and then you put that shit away, and you get back up, and you do your fucking job. Because if you don't, someone else will die." And that was the approach I try to take with my children. And good. He was, say, 11, and my daughter was 15 at the time, and my wife, who's very connected to animals, in a deep way, and I'm there trying to grab the reins and say, move on. We've got to put this, I saw myself kind of removed. It was a bit of an out of body experience. I saw myself trying to control that and tell them how to mourn, and I realized that that wasn't okay, but I didn't know how not to. So that caused me to have like a midlife break, where I just kind of fell apart. But then I had to keep life moving, and my daughter had a rugby tournament we were going to, so we had to go on and do this. And then I had this random conversation. Um, I was, like I said in the book, good Irish company, so we were quite drunk. And I don't want to stereotype, but don't let the Irish lie to you. They like to drink, even if they say it's not true. It is true. And I was keeping up. I do well with that, and so we were quite a few drinks into that night, and a guy asked me a question about my deployment, and he caught me off guard because I you get the question, "Oh, did you kill someone?" or things like that, and he didn't ask me that, and I was expecting that. And so when he asked me if I would, like, if I was ever scared, or did it scare me or something like that, and I told him a little bit of my, like, of the moments that were a little nerve wracking. So that must have changed you. And man, I couldn't sleep that night thinking about it, and I woke up the next morning. I kept thinking about it, and so all that happened, and then I just started writing one day. It wasn't to publish. It wasn't to even make a complete story. I just started writing things that I had never written down, and reliving things. And kept writing and kept writing. And I do this, like, when I write, I just don't. I just put everything and just write. No punctuation, no capitalization. I just write. And when I finished writing it and started kind of going back and reading it, once I structured it kind of in, some people say it's written in poem form of the book itself, but this almost spoken word kind of way. But some things I've read out there refer to it as like trauma writing. But it's very broken in the sense that it's just thought after thought after thought after thought without completing them. Like I went to college. I know how to write properly. I just didn't. I just dumped it out there and put it out there, and then I went back and I read a couple of them to my wife, and I would just break down when I was reading them. And I think that really stuck with me. That, like, for 19 years I told myself I didn't have PTSD. For 19 years I told myself that they experienced more. Um, don't focus on yourself. Focus on what they went through. And I think in those moments I really realized that I did have something to process, and I did have something to say about it all. Like, there was something worth talking about. So I just kept writing, and I kept connecting these different moments, where people said things to me that really, like, convinced me that maybe I wasn't normal anymore, or maybe I wasn't right anymore. And so as I just kept pouring all this stuff out, eventually about halfway through the writing, it became clear to me that I had something more. And I'd sent a text to my mom and dad after I kind of woke up aware that I had PTSD, and was willing to admit it, saying like, "Hey, like, I'm not okay. I'm working on it, but I'm not okay, and you need to understand that I've never admitted that, and I just need to say that I need to say that to the two of you." And then I wrote them again, saying, like, I think I have like a memoir, I'm working on. And so down the line a little bit, my both of them were like, "Well, we'd love to read it." And I come from a fairly religious upbringing, so The language in the book isn't exactly clean, and I'm pretty blunt about where I stand religiously, and personally as a human. And I thought, well, if my parents can read it and get through it without hating me for it, then I guess there might be something worth there. So I sent it to them, and but it wasn't complete. But I sent them about 70%, kind of without editing and just there. And my dad actually texted me and said, like, I'm there with you as you're writing it. I can see these things happening. And I thought, if he's feeling that, then this is something I need to continue on. So I think that it was this idea that, like, if I was being woken up by what I was writing. If that was the case for me, and other people that were close to me were also seeing that, maybe it was worth pushing myself through. And I actually had a moment where I stopped writing. I got it done. I got the whole kind of arc completed, but I knew I needed to edit, and I knew I needed to go back and fill in. And I just stopped. I got sick of reading it over and over again. And then a conversation with another stranger, essentially, sparked something in me, where he was saying, like you're on to something here. You need to continue on with that, like whatever it is, and there's a story to be told there. And I thought, shit, if this guy that doesn't even know me feels that way, and he's Irish, like he's not an American, he's not doesn't have any connection to combat vets. If he felt that way, I should maybe pick it back up. So I picked it up one day, one Friday, and by the end of that weekend, I hit publish on Amazon and just let it go. I'd kind of lied to myself. I told myself I'd publish it and then get an author's copy and then take it down because I didn't really want to share it with anybody yet. And yeah, so that's the long answer there.
Oh, well, it was a great answer. So I appreciate that background. Thank you on that.
Yep.
Um, and just real quick, a couple things. Number one, where you talk about the Restrepo, the documentary. I watched that when it came out, and I can picture this one kid now in there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
they're kids, and
Yeah,
they are kids. Um, so that's a documentary. If people have not watched that, I would recommend watch that. That's just something that it's it's very interesting, and it's an eye opener. And if people have no idea, hopefully once they watch that, they'll have an appreciation for what the soldiers went through over there. But no, recommend that
absolutely.
documentary. Number two, your parents. Considering what you just
Mm.
said about your parents, the background and whatnot, but the fact that your dad sent you that text and it came across the way you just said it, um, that's you can't have any more support than that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really beneficial. We've had our ups and downs, as I guess most parents and kids do. But he's always been willing to show support in that sense. And he pinned my blue cord on me at basic training when I graduated basic training. So he was there for a lot of those moments. But when I came home, I didn't talk to them about it. And not a knock on them. I think they both wish they had known more now. But they probably should have asked questions that they weren't interested in asking, because everybody was just happy I was home, and everybody was happy that, like, I didn't come back with clear violent PTSD, and so everybody just left it at that. And I get it. I look at it now, and if you don't want to poke something, and if you don't know, you don't want to cause someone more pain than they're already dealing with. So I get why they didn't. But um, it was really important to me that he saw it, and was kind of aware. So when he came back and said that, and my mom eventually read it, and she has the same thing. And honestly, I've had quite a few people now, um, family. Actually, one of them, my brother-in-law, he's younger than me, a bit younger than me, and he called me as soon as he finished it one day. It was shortly after I published it, like that a week later, I think. And he just called me, and he just wanted to tell me he loved me, and tell me, like, he's not really much of a reader. In fact, I think he said he's never read a full book
Mm.
before. And he said, I couldn't put it down. He said, I sat down and I read it in one setting. And I just wanted you to know I love you and I appreciate what you've done. And I'm really glad you wrote this or whatever. And I think that really hit, like, this reality that, like, it was connecting to people and speaking things that I hadn't been able to speak in person, and probably still would struggle to do maybe the story is justice, and without trying to undermine my own experiences. And so that was really special for both sides of the family, and just to see where it's gone from there.
Yeah, definitely touching people and having that support. That's huge.
It is.
So let's talk more about your book. There's a
Okay.
chapter in there that's titled Nagalam, Bait at Night. And it's about a mission that you were sent out on basically as bait to see if you would draw contact. Um, Actually, it's not the title of that chapter, I don't think, but that's, what it's about. And with that mission over, the chapter is actually called 20 Feet from the Wire. And it's about your return back to forward operating base Blessing.
So 20 feet from the wire. Pack up, mission over, move out, back to the fob. We take the easier route. I'm still on point, but the adrenaline's numbing me now, so I dig it. We're moving smoothly, and my team leader, crazy motherfucker, he used to say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So we kept it smooth. There's this feeling when you see the wire. It's like crossing the sea and finally spawning land. Something shifts inside of you. Your body lets out a fraction of tension, but you have to remind yourself, don't get complacent. Not now. Stay alert, stay alive. We cover distance quickly. Sleep's a few hundred meters away. I can see the tower clearly now. It's a sickening kind of close. Not home yet, like a cock tease. You know the warmth, but you can't feel it. Comms light up. Our return is confirmed. Keep moving. 100 meters. I can feel the adrenaline crash coming. I need a smoke. 50 meters. 10. We're under the point tower now. 20 feet further, then it happens. 3 cracks. Loud as fuck. Bullets snap overhead, whizzing. Close. Way too close. This doesn't make sense. Nobody attacks 20 feet from Blessing's wire. That's kamikaze shit, and this isn't the Pacific. We hit the dirt, fast. Instinct. Tension thick as hell. Still the lowest ranking US soldier in the group. There's 4 of us. Me, my battle, and 2 butter bars. We use that term with full disrespect. Butter-colored bars, soft as hell. And right on cue, they're in the fucking irrigation ditch across the road. Me and my battle stick to the training. We check with our ANA soldiers, try to locate the contact. Confused as hell, we hear yelling, not English, Dari or Pashto, from inside the wire. ANA comms light up, US comms follow. It's confirmed. The PKM in the tower, on our own fucking tower, opened fire. The gunner, an ANA soldier, had fallen asleep. Woke up, saw movement, panicked. He scrolls off 3 rounds before his weapon jammed. He thought we were Taliban breaching the wire. Friendly fucking fire. A weapons malfunction, I'm sure, saved most of us. From that distance, 7.62 rounds leave holes. We drag our butter off the street and we head back in. It's quiet, too quiet. Everyone's rattled. And then it erupts. That ANA soldier gets his ass beat by his own guys, hard. Even Afghan soldiers don't appreciate almost getting waxed by friendly fire. I watched it happen. I felt for him. He was low ranking, probably scared shitless, but we nearly died that night. There was no room for sympathy. I didn't get involved, just retreated to my hut. It sat right next to Blessing's gun line, the 155s. Sleep was never easy there, but that night it wasn't just the howitzers keeping me up. I puked, I tried to eat, I failed. Cigarettes, it's all I could manage. Smoked till I couldn't feel my throat, and then I went back inside. My battle and I shared a space. We were equals, we respected each other, we were scared shitless, couldn't eat, couldn't talk. So we watched some movies, sat too close, didn't say a word, eventually drifted off until the gun started again. He jolted, I jolted, we looked at each other, said something stupid, probably called each other gay, laughed, and off to our bunks to toss and turn the night away. I didn't understand that moment for a long time, but now I see it. It was 2 kids, terrified, just trying to feel safe, trying to pretend it was normal, trying not to show anything too real. Couldn't feel those emotions yet. I couldn't name them. I wouldn't let myself. It took me 19 years to understand the weight of that night and how long I'd carried it.
So you mentioned, thank you for sharing
Yeah.
that. Again, that's the chapter, 20 Feet from the Wire. You mentioned to me that incident broke you. Would you mind sharing more about that?
Yeah, I think that just this idea that, like, you know, Well, first, the story or the mission before being bait, going in and really like realizing what I was, not only bait, but I was lead man on the mission through the town. And then for the end of it to be like that, it just really shattered kind of this perspective of, um, the security force mission, everything was going to be safe. And then I become very aware that that wasn't the case, but this was the closest. This was the first time I had been in the encounter. And I think this was September time period of my deployment. So a few months after I'd been there, I was still 19, and it kind of shook me to the core. I actually remember shortly after it deciding that like um, I needed to get married. My girlfriend at the time and I were quite close. We'd known each other since we were 16, and we started dating a year before. Actually, right when I graduated basic training, we started dating. And I just felt so empty in the sense that I couldn't get over the fact that we all, a good group of us almost died, and I could have been one of those, and she'd just be left there, kind of as we would say, a dear John waiting to happen. So it shook me in this sense that I had to see life differently. And I go back sometimes when I look at pictures from the deployment, pictures before that moment and pictures after that moment, and it's different. I'm not the same guy. I'm not a kid anymore. You can see it in my face. My wife points it out too. Um, it was definitely a changing point, and I think just being there in that moment and not being able to talk about it with someone, not really knowing that it was okay that we were feeling that in those moments. And you talk about it, you're there with your buddies, but like you don't actually face it. You don't say like, you can't really admit like that scared the shit out of me. But then you're there, like, smoking till you can't breathe. And like, obviously you were nervous. Obviously it scared you. But um, yeah, I think that it just was that kind of first really close encounter with life and death. And at 19, when you experience that, I think that it's gonna shift things forever.
Yeah, that's a powerful chapter. I mean, it's a short chapter, but it's what you went through, what could have happened,
Yeah.
is loud. And so again, once again, thanks for sharing
Yeah.
information about that.
Yeah.
So you describe the time when you were 38 years old, when you met yourself when you were 19.
I'm gonna read again. Excuse me for all the reading, but we'll go into this. So Half-Life, 19-year-old me meets 38-year-old me. So when I wrote this, this is how I started. This moment is now. It's happening as I write, as I pour, as I brawl my way through the lines of this memoir. This is the product of that moment. The moment 19 years later where I finally look myself in the eye and acknowledge who I was, what I did, and what I felt. It's a perfect spring day, 2025. My daughter and I are getting ready for a rugby tour, Ireland to Portugal. She's 15. We've traveled a lot by now. The day before we leave, I'm in the shower about to pack, and I hear my son with panic in his voice. A suppressed shake fills his words. He's a tough kid. His strength is holding him together. But as he finishes his sentence, I hear a high-pitched crack as his toughness fails him. I knew the tone. I knew something was very wrong. So I dried off fast, still dripping. And he says it's one of the cats. Um, my heart drops, and I find my wife out front. One look, I know the cat's dead. Hit again. Clean, fast, but death is death. Snap into gear, tell the kids, get them outside, control the situation. Me, not them. They're breaking. My wife's on the ground, broken too. And then so am I. I broke, not the controlled break I'd mastered over the years. I quickly retreated inside so no one could see my eyes open up like the skies, and I fell apart, shaking, trying to regain some form of tough guy pride. But it was a complete collapse, not just about the cat, about everything I'd been holding at bay for 19 years, because for once, I just couldn't fix it. No amount of fire, no amount of motion, no amount of armor, nothing could stop this. I can fix almost anything but death. And when my kid hurts, really hurt, it feels like drowning. The next day, we move forward anyways. We catch the bus, the flight. We land in Portugal. Jade's team captain. She leads her team. She laughs, and then she cries between matches. In many ways, she was stronger than I ever was. I hold it together until I don't. We're at a group dinner, open bar, bottle of wine disappears in my hand. Good Irish company, good stories, too many drinks. Talking with another dad, we click, and he finds out that I serve. He finds out where I served, and he shifts. I can tell from his body language that he's being careful. Can I ask you something? He says. I hold my breath. Please don't ask that stupid fucking question. He doesn't. Instead, was it scary? I nod. Yeah, but a lot of my guys had it worse. He asked my scariest moment, so I tell him the story in 20 Feet from the Wire that I just read. He shudders. Fuck, he says, that must have changed you. And that was it. That was the trigger. The next morning, it was like bombs going off in my head. Flashbacks, grief, rage. It's not just memories anymore. It was full-scale assault. When I got home, I thought maybe it was just a moment. Maybe it would pass. Instead, it got worse. So I finally watched Restrepo, a documentary showing the valleys where I'd slept under the stars, the gun lines that thundered through my dreams. Then I watched Citizen Shoulder, a documentary where my unit's next about my unit's next deployment, the one that I almost went on, the one that I never came home from. Every bomb on the screen set off another bomb in my chest. Every radio call sounded like one I'd heard before. It wasn't nostalgia, it wasn't pride, it was just collapse. The wars I buried back came swinging. I'm there again, in the dark. Then finally, after all these years, I found him. 19-year-old me, sitting in the back of my mind where I left him. The smell of cheap Afghan cigarettes filling my mind. Instead of churning, insides churning as I get closer. Everything about me fading quickly as I look him in the eye. As I approach, there's a quiet, unspoken energy inside, one of knowing without saying. There he was, armor on, M4 203 slung over his chest, pack at his feet, cigarette in his hand, waiting. And for the first time in 19 years, I didn't avoid him. I didn't talk over him, I didn't shove him back down. I just sat next to him. I lit my own smoke. We don't speak, we don't need to. We just sit here, together, chain smoking through the wreckage. We finally met.
Hmm. You told me, and I sensed it as you were reading there, you told me that that chapter was an emotional one for you and still shows the haunting and lasting impact of war nearly 2 decades later. You feel comfortable talking about that and how that is?
Yeah, man, there were a lot of things that happened in the years that came, obviously. A lot of moments where you kind of had to just move forward and push it down. And I had a lot of help with substances for a while, and I don't know if that's help actually, but it felt like help in the moment. But and I talk about other things in the book. But one of these moments, 3 years ago, one of our guys actually kind of he snapped and he ended a murder suicide situation, I think, and I think I know. Sorry, but in all of that, I think there's this sense that I never really, I never really gave that kid credit, um, and that kid being myself, I never gave him credit for what he experienced. I just kind of always sloughed it off because I knew other people had experienced stuff that was bigger. And even in watching Restrepo, man, what those guys went through, that was significantly worse than what I went through. And I'm not trying to minimize because I understand that there's value in saying, I did experience stuff. But um, my buddy that I was just talking about, Madden, he spent about 6 or 8 hours pinned down in the Korengal Valley, so where Restrepo was filmed. And I think seeing that and really like feeling what those kids were talking about, um, it just shook me. It just really rattled me. And I'll be truthful. I've read this that chapter since I decided to read it on the recording. I read it about 4 or 5 times before because I knew that it hit me really hard every time. And obviously the cat passing and the kids being really heartbroken was those things were very difficult for me to process. But each time I read it, something else makes me a bit more emotional and gives me that shake in my voice. And um, I think just there's a sense that when you ignore a part of yourself for so long and it comes back and you see it for the first time and you really acknowledge it and you sit with it. I think it's the biggest thing. It's the thing I've had to really realize. There's a person I look up to that I've met recently, and he told me, and I've heard it before, but he kind of really hammered it home. Like the only way out of something is through it. And I think that's what I was doing that day. I bought a pack. I pretty much off and on don't smoke. I love to say I don't smoke at all, but I hadn't smoked for a while when all this really started to kick up. And I immediately, when I got to that moment after watching Rich Repo, I just looked at my wife and I was like, I just gotta have some. I just can't not. So I just went over to the shop, and they're like 18 bucks a pack here, so it's insane to even do this. But I went and bought a pack, and I just chain smoked for about an hour and a half, just sitting
Mm.
there on the porch. Like, that kid was sitting next to me, and I think that I was really young. I was really young when I went there, and I think that I just kind of wrote him off as some like kid that barely survived. And um, in that moment, I saw myself different. I saw like I was proud of myself. Like, for the first time in a long time, I was proud of the fact that I did survive, and that I came home, and that I figured my shit out. And while it was hard, and there was a lot of downs, and I probably wouldn't have made it without certain people in my life, I was proud of the fact that I did. And I think that realization that not only can I be proud of myself now, but that that kid is someone I can be proud of, and that he can be proud of me.
Mm.
It's kind of all back and forth when you start thinking of yourself in this past tense being around still, but um, it meant a lot to me. And I think it kind of put me in this spot where I said, okay, like, this is worth giving yourself credit for. And I think also it made me realize the amount of us that didn't give ourselves credit, not just myself, not just my platoon, but there's just so many of us who experienced different things that maybe didn't include actual to the book combat. Um, I have a lot of friends that spent time in Camp Buka, and if you talk to anybody who's been to Camp Buka and spent time as a prison guard there, they're different.
Mm.
It changed them. And I think realizing that, and kind of, I mean, I have one good friend who still won't really talk to me about Camp Buka. We've talked about everything, and we used together. We did a lot of stuff together, and just it was one thing. If I ever asked him about his time, he just said, "I won't talk about it. I'm just not talking
Mm.
about Buka." And there's that realization that, like, we all just had to put that kid back, tell him to go away, because focusing on it too much meant something more. And I think when life jumps up and forces you to look it in the eye, sometimes it can really shake you. And I think that's why that one got me, and it still kind of gets me. I probably shouldn't have read it 4 times before the call, because I probably would have been more emotional, but I didn't feel like breaking it on camera. So
You did great. You did great. All right. So, going through your book, a few chapters, obviously. The last chapter, which is titled "You Didn't Have to Fire Your Rifle." You say is a call to action and one that carries your whole message. And it's a nut for me when I read it. Well, number one, I read it, and then after you mentioned that you wanted to read this chapter, I read it again, and I'm like, wow, that's it's very impactful. So, if you wouldn't mind.
yeah, it was one of the last ones that I wrote. But it was kind of everything all in one, just trying to explain my thought process. So it's the last chapter. You didn't have to fire your rifle. It's hard for us to admit the quiet deployment, the contact unseen or barely seen, months, years at war, mostly bored, mostly waiting, preparing, seeing but not surviving the things we feared most. We saw the ones who really got hit, and we devalued ourselves. We shrank down our scars, pretended boredom was a blessing, pretended we didn't ache. We focused on the ones who had it worse and forgot what we carried. We told ourselves we didn't need help. Why would we? We never fired a rifle. We didn't see real shit, right? It took me 19 years, countless fuck ups, millions of moments, 2 kids, one marriage, and 1,000 quiet wars inside my own head to finally admit I went to war and it changed me. It doesn't matter if you fired your weapon. It doesn't matter if you bled out in the dirt or you just bleed out later in silence. It happened. You warred, you waited, you feared, you buried yourself alive, and now Now you have a choice. You can spend the next decade convincing yourself you didn't deserve to feel it, or you can finally fucking own it. You can finally stand. Tell the ones who carried you, I see you. Tell the man in your Tell the man in the mirror, I see you. Stop hiding your scars behind silence and guilt. If the world around you keeps flinching, if they're too soft to see the truth, then let them flinch. Smoke them if you got them. Move the fuck out. Keep going. Because that flinching, that's their betrayal, not yours. That's their weakness, not yours. You're not a monster. You're not broken. You're not something to be hidden. You survived war, and you're still surviving it. That makes you dangerous in all the right ways. That makes you worthy in all the ways they will never understand. So stand up, own your scars, speak your truth. You're still here, and you fucking earned it.
I love that chapter. And I want everybody to read your book, you know, uh, for those who served and have experienced, war or being deployed. Um, Even if they done, I hope they read your book. Don't get me wrong, but that's one chapter that would be,
Yeah.
I would speak to them. I think they'd feel it and get it.
Yeah, it's been interesting to me, to be honest. It's not even vets that have really surprised me. I think I may have mentioned it to you, I may not have, but one of the first people who contacted me about it, I don't know her. She's she's my mom's friend, but I've never met her. They're newer friends. She contacted me because she got the book, heard about it from my mom, and she was actually a Pentagon survivor, so 9/11 Pentagon
Mm.
survivor. And she said she couldn't read more than two chapters without breaking in tears. And she said she realized in these pages that, and I think probably towards the end of it really stuck to, but that she had things she had to unpack. And then I've had multiple people who didn't go to war who either have a spouse that went to war or just know people that did, but they said, like, I feel it. I feel like you were speaking to me and my experiences. An aunt called me and told me when she was 19, she had some stuff happen that she's really kept to herself and for the most part and never processed it. And she's like, look, I'm not trying to say what I went through was life threatening or anything compared to yours. And I think that's the point though. Like, um, we all go through pain and we all have these experiences, whether it's trauma or betrayal or whatever it might be. But if we don't own it, if we don't look at it in the eye and say like this is real, this is something I experienced, and like I know enough of your story that you're probably there with things that come to mind, and I think everybody's gonna be that way because that's just the world we live in, and not facing it doesn't help anybody. And I think that was my biggest message when I finished this was just um, if I was passing on my pain because I wasn't willing to look in the eye, I know the world is doing the same, and I just want everybody to say, like, I have the right to feel this, and I have the right to acknowledge it and tell people about it and claim it because it is real. And yeah, that's been kind of the mission since I let it go and put it in the world is that like maybe I can help someone else um, face their own pain so they can finally process it and give themselves the credit. Because I mean, war is hell, and it doesn't matter what your role in war is. It's not easy. It's not gonna go away until we face it. And the war didn't end when we got home, and there was things in place. And I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, my friends that I made overseas, those are my closest friends still today." And I hear a lot of people say they were able to get VA help, and I know that that stuff's there, but there's a whole group of us who didn't have that experience. I barely talked to any of my guys, very rarely. Um, I spent a month with one guy who um, I've only just recently reconnected with because of this book, and in that he shared some stories that happened in another deployment after, and you realize like how many of us were hurting, but because we weren't willing to admit it to ourselves, we didn't admit it to anybody else. And um, you're not going to go get a therapist from the VA if you're not even willing to say to yourself, like, what I went through is worth talking to someone about. So I guess for me, this call to action has just become like not just for everybody else reading, but for myself to say I have to be willing to talk about it. I have to be willing to put it out there and reach out to podcasts try to get this story told for not for myself to get like popular, but for this idea that like there is something to be done. And if there is, if you are dealing with this stuff, whether you were behind the wire in safety in Kabul or wherever it might be on your deployment, there are people who didn't necessarily even deploy, but they spent years preparing for it, and they're gonna have experiences that are gonna have shaped them into who they are. And um, I think realizing like realizing there was a huge stage where I felt like I was a threat. I was a problem that the world was pulling away from me. And realizing that that was all just because I couldn't face it and I couldn't own it because I didn't no one was teaching me how. Um, I don't want to point fingers at the VA or during our demo and the fact that they didn't say certain things, but I think a lot of us left untrained on how to come home and be willing to say like this happened. And then you jump back in life and life gets busy, and no one's got time to stop everything every time you need help, and you eventually learn to just find a way to cope. And I think numbing it is what most of us did. I know it was the group I have, that we were close, and whether it was the guys I went with or the guys I got to know afterwards, and really like there was quite a few of us who there's just quite a few of us who were just using whatever we could to mask it. And I think I guess my hope is that the ones that are still in that world will hear this and be willing to say like, hey, this is something I gotta address. And hopefully in some way or another they know they can reach out to me or whoever. I can't stand the thought of losing more people to
Mm.
what we know now to be like the suicide problem we're dealing with, and the violence within the military veterans. Like we got to fix that, and I don't think there's any way to fix it until more of us start standing up and saying like this is real and it's something I went through.
Yeah. Very well. All of that, very well said. And the fact that you wrote the book and it's going to touch a lot of people, and it's already helped people. And the more it gets pushed out there, the book publicized, and people are made aware of it, it's going to help a lot more people. So you should be very proud of that, of what you're doing. I want to just kind of move on real quick because we talked about early on in the intro, and then you mentioned it, and then about fishing, that you still love to fish. You have a passion. It brings back memories. Talk about your grandfather. So obviously that's you're passionate about that, obviously. But you started a well, I'll let you talk about this, but it's incorporating fishing to help veterans, and the title or the name of it is "Out of the Fire and Into the Current." Um, you want to tell us more about what you're going to do there? What that's all about?
Yeah, so like you said, fishing growing up, my grandfather was an avid fisherman. Now he'd hate the fact that I fly fish. The only reason I fly fish is because he's gone now. Um, he was anti-fly fishing for whatever reason. He taught me to spin fish. We spent hours and hours fishing together, my brothers and me, and my parents and me. But one thing that always stuck out to me, this one story, I was about 15 or 16, and I was fishing with him, and he brought one of his close friends was visiting, and so he came out on the boat with us, and we had a moment, just me and this other guy. His name was Ken, and he just looked at me and he said, "Your grandfather saved my life." And I said, "Why? What do you mean?" He said, When he taught me how to fish, he saved my life." And I didn't get it. I was 15, and there was no more to it. He wasn't a vet. He had none of that story. I don't know. I don't actually know his story very well, to be honest. I should probably know it better, um, but that kind of just was there. And over the years, then when my grandfather died, I actually stopped fishing for a while because every time I fished, I had
Mm.
to face that and the memories. And then I started fishing again. When I was actually living in Puerto Rico, I started saltwater fly fishing. It was very different than what I'd done. I always trout fish. Um, and I just started spending a lot of time alone. Um, and I don't do alone very well, if I'm being honest. I don't do silence, I don't do alone, and I don't do stillness very well. They've never been things that I've not never, but since I can my in my adult life, they're things I just haven't really done well with. And I've always been able to explain them. I'm the youngest of four boys, and we're all put together really closely, different things like that. But like it was something I knew I didn't do, but I had no one else to fish with. And so I just started fishing by myself. 5 o'clock in the morning when the sun's coming up, out there alone. Um, a lot of moments where you kind of start to feel like really uneasy, like you start checking behind you, like someone might be trying to sneak up on you and stuff. Like you just don't know. But in that time, and I will say, certain environments are not safe to fish alone in. And I hear a lot of people say, "Be careful fishing alone," and I'm totally with that. Like I get it. There are some that work. So don't just, if you don't fish and you don't know certain environments, don't just jump out by yourself. That's probably not the starting point. But um, all that to say, I really, in those quiet moments, I started to see myself slightly differently. Started to kind of get acquainted, and then last year, actually, I spent my wife was really good about giving me time. I think we both knew this was all kind of building. We didn't talk specifically about it, but we knew um, that I needed to process certain parts of myself, and accept certain moments in my life. And so she kind of let me put fishing on the pedestal as a primary. It's the first year I'd fish. I was probably on the water. Geez, I wouldn't even be able to do the numbers, but at least 100 days on the water in a relatively short trout fishing season. Um, I spent a lot of time just alone, stalking, trying to figure out what these fish are doing and why I could never catch them because I wasn't necessarily too great with a fly rod still. And then I did a trip to Bulgaria. Actually, I do this thing where I just find cheap stuff, and I found a cheap rent for a week, and I went and fished by myself in a foreign place for a week and around mountains. And in that time period, I really found this sense like I could do this and I could be by myself, and I wasn't afraid of these moments, and I was learning to figure it out. I would just, you know, completely foreign environment. And I just went out and just walked through the water and just spend 8 hours in the water, food in my pack, and I just felt like a soldier again. To be honest, I kind of started to connect with this military side of things. So when everything kind of kicked off with the book, I didn't really have any vision of doing this for like, I said before, it would be fun to be a guide, but I don't know if I want to be a fishing guide because that might corrupt something I love. So I just kind of went with it. I just fished by myself. And then as I got to talk, I mentioned him a bit ago, there's this other guy that I've gotten to know recently, and he's been pushing me because he feels like there's a lot to be said about PTSD and facing this and being willing to think about it. And he references things as like a golden thread. Um, so he suggested that maybe this was a golden thread for me, not the fishing part, but the focusing on PTSD and maybe how I could help other people that have dealt with some things, whether it be through war or other trauma moments. And something hit me the other day. It's all happened in the last week, and I mean, I'm saying I started something. It's literally like I put like the first layer of bricks down. I don't really know if anything, and just the idea and writing it out, this intent, and telling a few people about it. But the idea being that um, we all need to find that silence and be willing to face ourselves and be willing to kind of relax into nature, into this rhythm outside of ourselves, whether it's the current or the tide or whatever. I know the ocean has been a really kind of connecting place for myself, not through surfing, although I've listened to a few of your podcasts. And then actually one of your podcasts really kicked me and pushed me into this a little bit further. It was a few days ago, 4 or 5 days ago, I listened to the one with Nick Borelli, I think is his name. And he started,
Yeah, former a Marine,
yeah,
Borelli.
former Marine, spent some time, multiple deployments in Iraq, and hearing his story, how he was educated. Well, first he was a surfer, then he had an education, so he did his deployment, and he came back, and he said something about like this idea that like being kinetic is I think the word he used, um, wasn't really his natural, but he knew he had to force it to go on these deployments and do these things. But when he came back, he started to see this full circle, like how can I help? And then he ended up through, I believe, through his grad school program at the Jimmy, you'll know the
Jimmy,
name better.
yeah, Jimmy Miller Memorial Foundation.
At that foundation, he ended up there through his grad school program, working with people in the surfing and processing, and he talked about it being like one-on-one, one surfing coach and one individual who's dealing with something, usually a veteran dealing with PTSD. And it really stuck out to me that like that's the magic, this one-on-one moment, not necessarily because that one person's gonna help you process everything or carry you through, but because they're there to give you whatever you want out of the environment. And if you just want to sit on the surf and talk, or if you want to go spend all that time. And so I just started turning this over. Like I'm quite skilled at fishing. I've fished my whole life. I understand rivers specifically. I know where fish hide. I understand how to spot them and what they're feeding on. I know the hatches now. And I just thought to myself, man, like I could do something with this and I could reach people. So started kind of writing things down as I do. And I wrote a foundational intent piece, and in that, I came up with the idea that out of the fire into the current, it could be this moment where individuals show up, and it's just me and another individual going, sitting by the water. I did some time as I MOS queued, became a Cav scout after my deployment. So I have some ideas in scouting and, stalking these environments, and I use those when I'm fishing. I actually look like a bit of a nerd. My fishing gear is all camo. It's probably totally unnecessary. It just makes me feel really good, to kind of be embracing this other side of me and going back to that soldier. But the idea that, like, using these skills that we have and getting that quiet time by the water and the stillness, and maybe showing that to other people could be really valuable. So my hope is that, as I continue to push this, that maybe, I get some guys, whether they're coming here on holidays already, maybe they already live here. And I'm not really closed-minded to who. I know there's a lot of Ukrainian families living in Ireland here, and there's a lot of Ukrainian veterans coming that will be coming home theoretically, or not home, but coming to Ireland to live with their families. And there's an ever-growing need at this stage in the world for people to help process these pains and these emotions. And my thinking is that if I can use something I love to do that and just get that time with individuals, and not just for them, obviously this is going to help me heal. I'm still healing. Healing is a process. I don't know that it ever ends. Um, but there's actually a chapter in the book where I talk about the last battle and how, like, I'm really torn inside because I know I'm finishing up, but I can't leave. So this is
Mm.
kind of in my head, a hope that maybe I can use something I'm passionate about to help other individuals going through what I've gone through, or worse, or not as bad. It doesn't matter, just something they've personally dealt with that they need work to process. And maybe in that silence, in the current, they can let some of that go. And whether they fish one time with me and never fish again, or they become lifelong fishers and they look back one day and say, that saved my life. It doesn't really matter, but I hope that maybe, that it catches on. So now it's just a matter of putting it out there, and trying to find ways to promote it, and find people who are willing to trust me enough to show up. Um, Done a lot of things with breath work recently, just trying to calm myself and deal with, like, there's a lot of things you can do to deal with trauma, and so there's this sense that maybe I could bring that into the fishing moments before fishing, and kind of processing it. I know this season, since all this has happened, when I go out, trying to let the tenseness go and relax and bring myself back into my breath, and not focus on the catching, and focus on the water, focus on that moment in time. And anyways, I'm rambling about it, but that's kind of my vision. And so I'm hoping that this all kind of becomes that. And my goal is to make it free, just to have the gear. I have some gear now. We'll probably need more gear to outfit other people, but hoping that, someone can just, whoever they are, can just show up, no cost, none of that. Just go out, sit on the river, talk, maybe have a fire, maybe some coffee or something. Um, Tea. I don't think people back there drink much tea. I know it's popular here, but I saw a post of the day saying I like my coffee black and my tea in the harbor, and I
Oh,
kind of chuckled because because everybody here drinks a good bit of tea. So, but anyways, point being, just trying to let humans exist in silence so they can see themselves and what they've been through and maybe take a step in the right direction.
So, you say you told me a couple times that you didn't write your book to be a hero, or for absolution or pity or to tie a bow on anything. I want to say that your humility is loud and clear and it speaks volumes.
Thank you.
In my mind, and I'm confident in the minds of many others, they feel the same as I do. You and all who have served and are currently serving are without a doubt, and don't downplay this, are without a doubt heroes in many of our minds. So just please take that to heart and know that's from the heart. So with that said, before we wrap up, is there anything you'd like to say?
I mean, first of all, thank you for saying that. It's hard to hear. It shouldn't be. I know it shouldn't be, but it's this idea that like we minimize, and I feel like other people are heroes. Like I said, Nick, when I sent you a message, Nick's a true hero. To me, I don't see myself in that category, but I will take it to heart, and I do appreciate you taking the time to say it. I think, as someone who's been on this side of things, just my thing to yourself and to everybody else out there who have been giving me feedback, but um, keep saying that we all need to hear it more. I think we're all stuck kind of trying to downplay what we experienced or what we did, and seeing it the wrong way. And I think that really that message, just being willing to take the time and say something from the heart like that. And it's not just you that's done it lately for me and did it at different times, but to everybody listening, to anybody who's thinking about saying something like that to someone, it's worth saying it. It means more than we can ever really put into words. And we'll probably flinch and feel uncomfortable when you do say it to us, but that's all the more reason to say it. So
Well deserved.
thank you.
I know I've said this already, but I'll continue to say it. We've talked offline about, your book is awesome and I find value in it. And we're going to do what we can to, push it out and let people know about it. So go out and buy the book if you haven't already. In your book, you open up about your time in the Army, your struggles, your love for your fellow soldiers, your love for your family, and
Mhm.
love for just life in general, a lot more. And as I said, just I can't recommend the book enough. And I don't want to forget this. Just kind of digress real quick before we end here.
Yeah.
But you you think, and rightfully so, that you're probably like the luckiest, most fortunate man to have um, your two children
Yeah.
and your wife by your side, supporting
Yeah.
you. But never doubt that they're lucky too to have you as a husband and dad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jon, for opening up and sharing your experiences, your struggles, your accomplishments, and for sharing, those few chapters in your book. And you should feel very proud for all that you've done.